Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Timothy Lee. I'm a research analyst with Red Cloud Securities. I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on gold and copper exploration and development today. We will hear from Marshall Koval, CEO, and Scott Hicks, VP Corporate Development of Lumina Gold Corporation. During today's webinar, they will provide an overview and outlook. Then we will take questions. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and we will get to as many as we can. Before we kick things off, first we need to discuss some fine print during this Lumina Gold webinar. Forward-looking statements may be made. I would direct listeners to the company's forward-looking statements disclosure outlined on page 2 of the Lumina corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company's website, luminagold.com. For Red Cloud Securities, Inc., I would highlight that this webinar is for informational purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. And please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on Lumina. So we have Lumina Gold presenting today. The company is focused on the CANGREJOS gold copper project in Ecuador, which hosts a large resource and is advancing toward a pre-feasibility study. With that, I now turn it over to Marshall and Scott to update our audience on the company.
Great, Tim. Thanks for your time, and thanks for all the listeners' interest today. Yeah, as Tim said, we're advancing the largest primary gold deposit in Ecuador. It's in southwestern Ecuador in El Oro province. Here's our forward-looking statement Tim talked about. And let me just give you some highlights on the CANGREJOS deposit. It's the only asset that we have in the Lumina Gold. We're advancing it to the PFS, as Tim mentioned. We have an indicated resource. This is in the PEA that we did in 2020 of 10.4 million ounces of gold, 1.4 billion pounds of copper. And in the inferred resource category, 6.7 million ounces of gold and 0.8 billion pounds of copper. CANGREJOS is a top 15 global development project. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the presentation. The 2020 PEA showed a large production profile, over 366,000 ounces a year of gold production over 25 years with low AISC costs of $604 an ounce of gold net of the byproduct copper. And if you look at 1680 gold, roughly, well, we're a bit higher today for sure. That's a $2.5 billion NPV at a 5% discount rate. We actually did the study at $1,400 gold and 1.6 billion NPV. You know, obviously, Ecuador is an emerging jurisdiction with excellent project infrastructure, particularly in our area where CANGREJOS is. And we've initiated a PFS that we see it'll be done in Q2 2023, where we completed 36,000 meters of drilling. We're well advanced in engineering all aspects of the project, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as we go along. So if we do the corporate overview, issued and outstanding shares, 376 million, fully diluted 411 million. That's primarily options, the difference there between options to the staff. Market cap is 134 million. In December 9th, we're trading at about 36 cents a share. Currently, we're operating on a credit line from Ross Beatty, our largest shareholder. And in the 52-week trading range has been between 23 and 66 cents a share. Right now, we're sort of in the 34, 35 cent range, too close, in my opinion, to our 52-week trading range. But that's an opportunity for investors to get in as we move the project forward, particularly when we put out the PFS results in Q2. So Ross has 20.2%. We have an Ecuadorian entrepreneurial group that has 18.4%. Management and the board has 9%. Route 1, a diversified investment fund out of California, has 6.8%. So roughly that's 54% of the total shares. The balance is float in the market. Red Cloud has coverage, Haywood and Raymond James. I think everybody here knows that Ecuador has been an emerging mining jurisdiction. We entered in the country in 2014, and since then there's been two major mining projects permitted in operation and producing: Fruta del Norte of Lundin Gold and Mirador of Tongling Mining and China Rail. Also, the Curipamba project is permitted financing, and I guess there's some additional minor permits that they need to put in place to start production or construction. And then we've got La Plata and Loma Larga projects are ready to construct. And then at the feasibility study and PFS stage, there's Cascabel. They have a PFS completed. They're working on the feasibility study. CANGREJOS, we're working on our PFS, and then the Condor, which is a sister company of ours in Luminex Resources. And we have a PEA, and we're continuing to do exploration drilling there. You can see what's happening in the upper right-hand side here on the exports since 2018. There's been significant exports from Mirador and Fruta, and then small-scale mining. In addition, there's been quite an investment in exploration throughout the country as well. And the Fraser Institute has ranked Ecuador positively, and you can see on this graph here from 2014 to 2021, it's increased its rank globally to the 24th best jurisdiction to invest in out of 84 jurisdictions globally. So a little bit of history and overview of CANGREJOS. This was a project discovered by Newmont in 1990 and 2000. They did quite a bit of work there. In 2011 through 2012, there was 4,000 meters of drilling on top of the 7,000 meters that Newmont did. And this was by Odin Mining, which is Lumina's predecessor company. And subsequent to that, this current management has drilled 85,000 meters, completed a PEA, and we're working on completing the PFS. Metallurgical work is completed by both Lumina and Newmont. And we completed a PEA in June of 2018, and then we updated it in 2020 to add the Gran Bestia deposit. So today, there's two deposits on within the CANGREJOS project: the CANGREJOS deposit and the Gran Bestia, and I'll show you a bit more about that later. Some of the advantages that the project has is it's got the power grid basically connected to site, obviously that need to be upgraded to put the project into production. There's ample power, it's inexpensive. Ecuador is competitive because of the hydro power within the country. We're about 40 kilometers from Puerto Bolivar and 30 kilometers from Machala. Puerto Bolivar is where the Mirador mine on the eastern side of the country is shipping their copper concentrates from. That's about a 350 kilometer haul. So our advantage is we're 40 kilometers from that port. We have paved, good infrastructure, paved roads within about 8 kilometers of the project. There's ample water planned for the project. In the PEA in 2020, we looked at starting at 40,000 tons per day and then expanding to 80,000 tons per day. And the PFS will ultimately have that 80,000 ton per day production profile, but we'll phase the project a bit different. But there's ample water there. Elevation, it's from an Andean perspective. The highest point on the project is about 1,350 meters above sea level. And quite a few areas in the project are lower than that. Communities, the closest community by road is about 7 kilometers from the project. We've had a good, constructive, ongoing relationship with those communities. And, we get a lot of questions about CANGREJOS. Does the project have scale? Yeah, it's the 37th largest primary gold asset in the world by resource. When you look at the resource, whether it's an operating mine, development, or exploration project, it's 37th largest. It's 12th largest undeveloped primary gold deposit by gold capacity. And what about the grade? So, CANGREJOS is more akin to a porphyry copper. It's actually a gold copper porphyry system, and it's a lower grade but very large tonnage. We're looking at measured and indicated at 0.7 grams per ton gold equivalent. Or if you look at it from a copper equivalent basis, it's about 0.5%. So if you look at other projects in that copper equivalent range, Cobre de Panama, Mount Milligan, and Red Chris have all been built. They're sort of that size. What about CapEx? CANGREJOS is in the 2020 PEA, the initial capital was about $1 billion. So Fruta and Mirador Fruta was a bit less and Mirador was a bit more. And so projects of that size and scale have been financed and permitted and constructed in Ecuador. And how advanced is the project? Like I mentioned earlier, the PFS will come out in a few months. PFS will allow us to negotiate an investment protection agreement and start some of the construction permitting to commence. Let's take a look here at both CANGREJOS. CANGREJOS is on the right here, and then Gran Bestia is on the upper left. Both of these deposits remain open. We did quite a bit of infill drilling, and there is still some open areas to be tested. We're able to expand the resource. Right now, we're in the process of finalizing the resource estimate, which will be included in the PFS that we put out. This is another cross-section looking the other way. So on the right here, you have the CANGREJOS deposit, and on the left is Gran Bestia. So you can see in the area that it's sort of a porphyry system with some breccia. The red drill intercepts are the higher grade intercepts in the project. The last hole that we drilled in the 2020 PEA is this red line that is on the left at Gran Bestia. Subsequently, we drilled to the left, which would be to the west and the northwest, and we've expanded the Gran Bestia deposit. This is a picture on the right of the block model, and that last vertical hole is there, and then you can see this C22-160 hole that we drilled to the left. We're able to extend the Gran Bestia deposit beyond the pit limit of the 2020 PEA. So anyway, we had some really good intersects here. This hole number 235.9 grams per ton gold equivalent over 280 meters. And then hole number 39.79 grams per ton over 454 meters from the surface. The one advantage Gran Bestia has, it's very low stripping ratio. In the PEA, it was about 0.5 to 1. So we're hoping to add more ounces and keep a low stripping ratio there at Gran Bestia. This is looking at the broader exploration potential of the area. If you can see CANGREJOS, it's a bit small where the concentration of black dots are on the bottom right there, and then Gran Bestia to the left of it. But what we're trying to show here is that beyond this, there's other drill targets, Pan de Azúcar, Valorizo, and then this green line that surrounds the pits there is the 0.2 soils anomaly. So the soil and the deposit align really well, and there's more exploration potential in that area. So just look at the 2020 PEA summary. We looked at 40,000 tons per day initially, expanding to 80,000 tons per day. And then we looked at gold production of 366,000 ounces per year average and 46 million pounds of copper per year. I talked about the AISC earlier, but I'll pop down here and look at pre-tax NPV at $1,400 gold and $275 copper. We had I'll go to the post-tax NPV, 16%, and then for 1680 case, 21%, and that gives us an NPV at $1,400, so 1.5 billion, and then 2.5 billion if you use the 1680 price. This is looking at the metallurgical work. Quite a bit of metallurgical testing has been done on the project, and the project contemplates both doré gold production. About 12% of the gold recovered would come from doré, and 70% would come from gold copper concentrate. Copper recoveries are basically 84%, and there's a little bit of silver byproduct and molybdenum byproduct as well. Currently, we're doing quite a bit of metallurgical testing. We're doing a pilot plant test work right now, and we're hoping to improve these recoveries slightly, both gold and copper. This is sort of the time frame that we're looking to get the project towards construction. Basically, right now, we've completed the 36-kilometer drilling program. The pre-feasibility study is well underway. Engineering's advanced, and we're looking at having that out early in Q2 2023. We're the first company in Ecuador to negotiate a exploration investment protection agreement, and this sets the framework for us to negotiate exploitation investment protection agreement once the pre-feasibility study is completed. So we're looking at initiating a feasibility study shortly after the pre-feasibility study is in place. And along with that, we'll be able to start, once the PFS is done, start working on permitting the project. And then the project contemplated about a 3-year build to put it into production. So if we look at CANGREJOS on a global stage, there's only 28 active gold development projects that can produce over 250,000 ounces of gold. CANGREJOS is the 5th largest one held by a development project controlled by independent. You can see all the blue bars here. These are majors or mid-tier companies that control these projects, and the gold bars are the independents. And you can see CANGREJOS in green. We are independent. Interesting note on this is right now, Hard Rock, I'm on the board of Equinox Gold, and we're actually building the Greenstone Hard Rock deposit. Cote is being built as well. So you can see CANGREJOS fits right into these projects that are on the development path and being put into production. One of the key things, we get hit a lot about the grade on CANGREJOS from some of the investor groups. If you look at this on the right, gold equivalent grade, it's one of the lower ones of these development projects, but it's also got the lowest stripping ratio of all these. So if you take the mine plan grade divided by the stripping ratio, it makes CANGREJOS look significantly better. And this is a key point. It doesn't drive all the economics, but the implications of this is much lower mining costs. You don't have to move as much material. So if you look at Cote, its stripping ratio is quite a bit higher, as is Magino and Greenstone. So if we look at developer peer from a PNAV basically valuation, gold and copper developers in Ecuador are trading at about a 0.19 PNAV ratio, where Western developers are about a 0.3. You can see right now Lumina Gold's trading at 0.11. We think we're significantly undervalued in that context. And basically, as we move forward and continue to de-risk this, we should see a good improvement in that, more in line with the Solaris and Adventus sort of PNAVs there, and move closer to the Western developers as Ecuador continues to be a positive mining jurisdiction. So this is a little bit different way to look at the value disconnect that we can see. So, we started in January 2017 and basically had our first inferred resource of 4 million ounces. And, today, basically we've advanced our deposit four times since then. Gold's gone up 51%, copper's gone up 41%, and our share price, including all financings, is at 68%. It's down. So basically, I think this illustrates a real good growth potential that the company has from all the value and de-risking that we've completed as a company. Obviously, corporate social responsibility is a cornerstone to anything that we do. We work closely with our communities, our providers within the area, the government as well, and regional and at a federal level. We've done quite a bit with reforestation. We've got a lot of land that's been replanted, where a lot of the area of the concession has been grazing. We've planted more than 21,000 local species of trees to date. We built and operate greenhouses where we develop these, a lot of the material that we use for planting. We have a lot of tons of compost created to date, 1.5 metric tons that we use in this reforestation program. A lot of our efforts go into education with local community, training with jobs. We use the local community on the reforestation plans to learn, how to do a lot of that work themselves in their own community. We've built greenhouses with the local community that they operate for vegetables and that sort of thing. And then we've done a lot of school programs with the local communities as well. Entrepreneurship, we've supplied a lot of goods. We've done women programs for entrepreneurship. We had a real successful program recently here where we did an art program in the communities to develop artworks for sale and then Christmas ornaments and that sort of thing. That's done well. We're supporting the cacao farmers. And then through the COVID-19 crisis that we had in the area, we did a lot of work with the local community to provide donations, sanitation kits, provided food. We were real active with the community in an area where there is government institutions, but they were all pressed with the broader COVID crisis that was throughout the country. But we got closer with the community with a lot of the health support. So out of a bad situation, we were there to help the community. So that's a lot of the programs that we've done on the corporate side. So here's some pictures. This is the greenhouse on the upper left, and some of the elder women in the community have been real active with that. And you can see that they've grown a lot of vegetables for their own use, but also surplus vegetables for sale and plants and that sort of thing. And, with the FIFA World Cup on now, it's interesting that we supported a lot of local communities prior to this. So you can see some of the kids out there on the soccer field, pretty much interest throughout the region in both boys and girls in soccer. So when we summarize things here, since the 2018 PEA, which showed a large-scale profitable project at $1,300 gold, we more than doubled the size of the resource, and then again we doubled it in the 2020 resource estimate. We put out a positive study in 2020, 1.6 billion NPV at $1,400 gold at $1,680, $2.5 billion NPV, 25-year mine life versus a 16-year mine life that we had in 2018. With the PFS study, we're likely looking at about a 25, maybe a bit longer mine life. We've advanced the Grand Bestia target. We should see more ounces out of Grand Bestia, more copper. And once we have this PFS completed, we'll work with the government to negotiate a term sheet on the investment protection agreement, and those terms we'll be able to use in a feasibility study, and then we'll work on construction permitting as well. Anyway, the team has a track record of successfully advancing these large-scale projects, so we'll continue to work hard, and that's kind of the presentation, Tim.
Great. Thank you very much, Marshall, for the informative presentation. We will now start the Q&A portion of this webinar. A reminder to everyone on the line, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. We do have a question here that's sort of, interesting about the overall advancing the project. But why continue advancing with an established value of billions in the NPV? Are potential buyers asking for this de-risking work?
There's a couple aspects of this. You've got in Ecuador, the way the concession system works, you have a exploration period, advanced exploration, and then you have 4 years for advanced exploration. And then economic evaluation, you have 2 years plus 2 years. So there's a term on the overall concession. So independent of whether we were to put the project into production ourselves or someone were to buy us, you need to keep advancing the project along those lines towards at least the feasibility study so that you can kind of meet that time clock that's ticking. Scott, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think from what we've seen from potential buyers, it's really people wanting, opportunities that are a little bit closer to production, perhaps. So, certainly post the 2020 PEA, completing the 36,000 meters of drilling and the PFS obviously gets you 2 years down the track and a bit closer to, I think, what most buyers are looking for these days.
Great. And another question here. In your opinion, what is the reason why the market does not recognize the value of Cangrejos? Is it the Ecuador factor or high construction costs, or what what else do you think is influencing that?
Scott, you take a shot and I'll come in behind you on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think candidly, we were probably putting on our best drill holes in 2018 when we were really ramping up and increasing the size of the deposit. And, as some of you might remember, that wasn't a particularly great time in the market. I feel like anytime we've kind of got traction, there has been a bit of noise on the political front in Ecuador, whether it was, June of this year or previous times where there's been protests in Quito. But, that does kind of put a brush over most of the stuff in Ecuador. I mean, as Marshall showed you guys, a lot of the companies do trade at lower multiples. In this area, El Oro we're in, we think it's one of the best areas in the country to be in. And certainly the protests didn't affect us that were in Quito earlier this year. But, I think that's hard to delineate in the market for people. And then, I think we do get a lot of questions around the CapEx and the grade. And, I think we'll demonstrate once again in the PFS that, it's an extremely robust project at today's metal prices.
It's a good summary.
Great. One here that's a little speculative, but assuming the company will be bought at some point, in which quarter would you anticipate over the next 2 or 3 years would maximum shareholder value be recognized?
That's all yours, Scott.
Wow. I don't know how to answer that particularly. Certainly it's still the plan for management to pass this along to a larger company at some point. The group's sold companies at different points here at resource stage, PEA, PFS, and feasibility in the past. So, we're going to keep doing the work that's required to get this thing down the track, regardless of whether it gets sold or not in the near term. I think, as Marshall was saying, we kind of saw a low in the market in October there. I certainly added some shares at that point in time. You can kind of, I play the waiting game with some of this stuff, but there will be a point where, the majors do have to restock reserves and come back into the market. They've obviously been returning capital with dividends and share buybacks, but it's a business where everyone's got finite resources, so they will have to replace them at some point. So, it's a little bit over to you as to when you think that'll happen, but we're optimistic for both the price of gold and certainly for the majors coming back on the M&A cycle.
Great. One question here about on the cost side, but what is the cost to conduct a feasibility study, and what is the current money in the company's treasury?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, the rough cost would probably be in the neighborhood of $20 million US for the feasibility study and the drilling that would be required for that. And the drilling there would really be the payback period at Cangrejos. So kind of you drill off the first, call it 4 or 5 years of the mine life to get that to measured up from indicated. So that would be some of the cost, and then a lot of engineering and project work there. So that's the main cost, and then obviously you'd have G&A for the period of time it took you on top of
that. And kind of following up on the financial side, can you tell us a little more about financing of these next steps?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, Ross is very committed to backing the company right now. Obviously, he's sole funding it. When we would have needed money last, it was kind of that June period we were talking about where, the broad gold and copper market was kind of in a bit of a free fall. Plus, we did see those protests in Quito. So I mean, Ross is content backing the company right now. I see there's another question in the chat there that I'll kind of address at the same time here, where they're asking if streaming or royalties would be used for future funding. I think that is an option for the company for sure to advance it to a construction decision. Obviously, this type of asset is very well suited for streaming with the byproducts it has, both in copper and silver. Or you also could look at the primary gold material. But because it's such a low operating cost asset, I mean, this is a first quartile operating cost asset. You do have a lot of flexibility for potentially looking at streaming as a way to fund to a bigger construction financing package.
Okay, great. And one other question on the exploration kind of side. You had some nice drill holes this year that were stepping out at Gran Bestia. Is there any plan to follow up there? Is that still open for expansion?
It's definitely open for expansion, both to the north and to the northwest. So over the ridge to the north and over the ridge to the northwest, and at depth also. And CANGREJOS is still open in southwest area and at depth. So there is the potential to expand it. I think as we finish the pre-feasibility study and we continue to advance the project, the focus will be back on the infill drilling, as Scott mentioned, to get the payback period to a measured resource so that it can be converted to a proven reserve. Once you have the PFS, the resources that are indicated and above get converted to proven and probable reserves. So that would be the focus. Possibly they do a little bit of exploration work, but this thing's huge as it is. So I think we have a pretty good path going forward without having to do a lot more exploration.
Yeah, and I mean, with those holes that we have already released, I mean, you can you see on the cross section volumetrically what we're kind of expecting to add, but we do think this will materially add to the resource, and we'll probably add more ounces than a lot of gold companies have in general in the public markets when we do this update. So it was a very successful drill program. I know we kind of present this matter of factly, but I think we achieved everything we wanted and more with the 36,000 meters.
Great. And one question here, obviously industry-wide, there's been long wait times for assay results. Have you experienced delays in assay labs, or are you able to get things done in a timely manner?
Yeah, I mean, when we were doing the drilling, which we cut off several months back, we were having delays, sometimes as much as up to 2 months. In our sister company, Lumina, where we're currently drilling at the Condor project, we're getting stuff back in about 2 to 3 weeks normally. So it's almost back to normal time.
Okay, great. And I think that's all the questions we have here today. I guess one final question I would ask, you've kind of gone over it, but just to review, what are the next steps and what are kind of key catalysts over the coming months?
Yeah, so basically the biggest catalyst in the next couple of months is going to be when the PFS is published, and that'll include an updated resource, a new mine plan, new engineering. What we're looking at is phasing the project a bit differently in the PFS, where we had initial capital of about $1 billion in 2020 to start at 40,000 tons per day, and in year 6 start at 80,000 ton per day production. We're going to phase it to try to get the initial capital in a better place at 30,000 tons per day, but go to 60,000 in year 3, and then ultimately in year 7, go to 80,000 tons per day. So, those sort of things, you'll be able to see the effects of that on the economics of the project. Obviously, there's been inflation since 2020, so we're working any way we can to optimize the project flow sheet, do anything we can with engineering to tighten up those costs. Hopefully, we'll get some higher metal recoveries. That should help us. So, those are the kind of things, and that's the main catalyst that you'll see is the announcement of the PFS.
And then we should also have some results out from, we're doing a 5,000 kilo met program right now in Lima. So we'll also have some results out from that prior to the PFS coming out. So that should be good. And but Marshall's right. Obviously the focus, I think, is on the PFS.
Great. Well, thank you again very much, Marshall and Scott, for presenting today. And thank you everyone out there for tuning in. Just a reminder that Red Cloud Securities will be back Wednesday afternoon when our webinar series continues with Japan Gold presenting Wednesday, December 14th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great rest of your day.